So my next question is this, right? So I started off with the guy who I met in Harlem, who was in a shelter already, struggling to get where he needed to go. And he was frustrated because he had to get to his program and then get to his shelter and the curfew, and he couldn't get work. So, like, how can we apply like this information to his situation? That's my question. So, basically right off the bat, we can eliminate these, right? Because he's already in the shelter. So it would do no good to send him to Bellevue. It would do no good to send him to the intake. It would do no good to send him, because this is all the process he's already gone through. He's already gone through the whole rigmarole of, that's apparently the word of the night, of, I don't even know if it's a real word, but we're making this up as we go. So he's already gone through the intake process. He already went through he got the placement, but now he's in the process of waiting for affordable housing, which could be a very, very long wait. But now he's stuck in sort of this loop. It would also make no sense to send him to a private shelter, right? Like a Queen of Peace, like a temporary 2-week, 1 week. Remember I mentioned like private, like privately funded temporary shelter. That wouldn't make much sense. The only exception to that, I would say, is if you're talking to a person who is maybe someone's in danger, or someone who feels like they're not safe at their shelter, their city shelter, or is choosing to be in the street instead of their shelter, which is a lot of people. So if you meet that kind of person, even if they've already been in the shelter system, you're not going to recommend. You would recommend private shelters. But for my friend, that wasn't going to work, because his issue was not that he didn't feel safe in his shelter. His issue is that he's not getting ahead in his shelter. And there's a world of difference. So you meet someone who says, I'm not safe in my shelter, or you meet someone who says, I'm choosing to sleep on the subway, even though I've been placed in a shelter because I don't trust the shelter. That is a person who you can still have a conversation with about short-term emergency shelters like missions, like Catholic options. So in this guy's situation, though, that's not going to work. So that leaves me with my third option. Now, let's talk about what the goal is for this guy, and let's talk about what the goal is for a lot of folks. Like I said in the very beginning, the goal is usually permanent housing. That's usually what most people who are in the street are operating under the assumption that if they had a room, they would be okay. And for many of them, that very well might be true. And that's why, like I said, the housing first model works for a lot of people. Now, I personally don't believe it works for all people. I think it's a sort of a one-size-fits-all. You take someone who's actively addicted to heroin and shooting up every day, and you give them an apartment, and now they have enclosed doors to shoot up heroin every day. It's not exactly a good fix. So it's not really a solution. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But there are folks who, if you just get them a place, they would do really well. But the argument against that philosophy is the exception. I think one thing that I hope that we can change as Christians in New York City is this sort of generalizations and sort of sweeping one-size-fits-all answers, right? So like, if I can go back fast enough, like the cool little cartoon we had, and Jess did this cartoon, I got to show it again because I breezed through it. There's like one size fits all, right? I really hope that Christians can like just eliminate this from our thinking. Like there is no one size fits all solution. Just because housing first works for one person in a situation like Salt Lake City or in LA or Houston or something does not necessarily mean that it's going to work for everyone in New York City or even everyone in Houston or everyone. So like there are people who fall through the cracks. So we can't go into this conversation thinking that they're gonna, all we gotta do is get them a room. Because the other issue is this, right? Our goal as Christians, let's be real. You put someone who is struggling to stay sober, or someone who struggles with loneliness, someone who struggles with abusive tendencies, and you give them their own room or you give them an apartment, and really you haven't solved anything. They're still going to have that same emptiness in their soul. They're still going to be, they're still going to have that struggle, and they may end up homeless again because they just don't have the capacity to deal with the things that they need to deal with, that we all need to deal with, which is sin. I mean, so that is a very real thing that we have to remember. So it's not, as one of my coworkers loves to say, it's almost never either or, it's both and, right? So you're going to have situations where we can connect someone to a program, connect someone to a detox, but if we're not going to minister to their soul, if we're not going to minister to their their holistic being, that we are setting them up for failure in the future. So we have to remember that that's an important detail. So my friend wouldn't work in the New York State shelter system because he's already in the New York State shelter system. He wouldn't work in privately funded shelters because he already has a place to stay that's relatively stable. He's just frustrated because he can't get ahead. The other issue, like I said, is his goal is to get permanent housing, but where he is not getting there. And the other option is to rent an apartment. Like, so for instance, he's not a veteran. I asked him, are you a veteran? Because that's a key question to ask. If someone's looking for affordable housing and they are a veteran, they will have increased odds of getting affordable housing quickly. There is, right now, it's, okay, may sound crude, but I hope it doesn't. I hope it's not offensive. It might be, but let's go with it. So, like, in the 80s and 90s, there was like a lot of time, a lot of funding, and a lot of things were created to respond to the HIV crisis. So a lot of times there was a lot of housing, a lot of options for people who are HIV positive. So there's a lot of options, like a lot of money, federal money and state money that sort of went into housing and helping people who are HIV positive. We have great programs as a result of that. We have Harlem United and Bailey House and a lot of these other programs that are set up with funding to help people who are HIV positive. Right now, currently, I believe that the new thing that people are really pouring a lot of money into right now, the response that comes from the top, from the federal government to the state government, where the most funds are right now is veterans. So like, it's an important question to ask someone, hey, are you a veteran? Because right now, currently, there's a ton of money being poured into the systems to end veteran homelessness. So you talk to someone who's in the street and they're a veteran, you say, okay, cool, well, let's explore options with that, because there might be a way to expedite housing if I can get you connected to the right resource. And there are resources out there. Sometimes it's as simple as just Googling it. Veteran housing, subsidized housing services in New York City. I know if you want more specifics on that, you can contact me and I'll get, there's a program that we are familiar with that helps people who are veterans try to get housed. So like, that's an important thing. Now, my friend, like I said, is not a veteran, so that doesn't really work for him. The other issue, he's not disabled, because a lot of times people with disabilities actually have the option of getting more subsidized housing because they fall into the criteria of people that the city and the state and the federal government are trying to get off the street, or people who qualify in some way, shape, or form. So there is actually a sheet in your packet for an organization called Housing Works. Housing Works is an organization that we partner with that tries to get people connected to long-term subsidized housing. It's a process. That's the other thing that you have to remember about with affordable housing versus emergency shelter. The reason I made that distinction up front is because you're not going to be able to get someone from the street to affordable housing in one afternoon. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a process. So you kind of have to find a way to triage their situation, their acute situation, where they are right now, and then maybe work on the process to get them towards housing through, like, while they're stabilized. So if someone expresses the fact that they have diabetes, or someone stresses that they are disabled in some form, or they receive SSI, or supplemental Social Security income, or they receive SSD, supplemental security disability, or these are folks that you can ask the question, well, what qualifies you for that assistance? And if they say, well, I'm struggling with mental illness, or I've been diagnosed with bipolar, and I've been diagnosed with something or other, you can then say, well, maybe this is a situation where you might qualify for subsidized housing. So let me get you connected to Housing Works, which is an organization that tries to get people who have disabilities or who qualify connected to a housing specialist. Now again, it's not going to happen overnight, and it may not happen very soon at all. But if we can get them connected to someone who actually will advocate for them along the way, it may expedite the process. One of the issues you run into in the shelter system is you have 60,000 people with far fewer social services advocates. So you have someone who's maybe in a shelter who's dealing with a caseload of 300 clients. It's crazy. You're not going to be able to deal with that many people, and you're not going to be able to move the ball forward because you're human. You just can't do it. So sometimes getting them connected to a Housing Works or to another outside agency that specializes in that kind of thing can actually help kind of move the ball forward, or at least get someone from an outside perspective to call. Because another thing you can ask them is, well, is your caseworker working for you? So for my friend in Harlem who is frustrated because he can't see his kids, he's in the shelter, but he can't get work, and he's in a program, one of the things I asked him was, look, do you have a caseworker? Who is advocating for you right now? Is there someone that's helping you out? Is there someone who's making calls on your behalf? Is there someone who's trying to move the ball forward? And the answer for him was, I have no idea. Nobody. I don't like, there's someone there that's supposed to be helping me. I don't know, I met her once, I talked to her for 15 minutes, and now I haven't seen her since, and now all they're doing is asking me if I'm working. And now I don't know what I'm doing, because I can't find a job because I had to be in curfew by 5, and I can't actually, because I have to do my program by 9, and I can't see my kids. So he was kind of stuck. And that was his frustration. So I asked him, do you have a caseworker? Is this person helping you? If he says no, or if he says I'm feeling really kind of isolated, then what I'll do, my next step is to say, well, let's get you connected to someone who will. Let's find someone who can actually maybe help move the ball forward. Just so for your guys' sakes, if you can get anyone connected to the relief bus, we do have a social worker on staff to help kind of move the ball forward. What I would rather you do instead of, we're trying to protect her because she's kind of got a huge caseload now too. So I would suggest you guys getting them to the bus and having them ask for one of our outreach leaders so we can kind of triage the situation before we refer them to our social worker. So instead of having you guys go directly to her and overwhelm her with contacts and stuff, which is completely going to happen anyway, she's already overwhelmed. But so we can kind of do our own form of divergence in a way, so that we can make sure that our social worker is keeping her sanity on some level. Most of it's already gone, but we can help a little bit. Yes?
Sorry, quick question. I know we're not covering every situation possible, but real quickly, I know the VA hospital sucks, but if you're a veteran, why would you not want to start with a VA hospital versus going through this kind of shelter program stuff?
Yeah, the issue oftentimes is just bad experience.
Okay.
They don't want to go back. They were treated badly. They don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of people who just want to talk about their war stories and their wounds. I mean, I've heard everything. I've heard all the reasons in the book. Most of the time, it's because people don't want to go. So it's I would tell the person in that situation. I would usually say something along the lines of, "Well, have you been there recently?" Because it's possible that things have changed. It's possible that you went 20 years ago or 10 years ago and things were really bad, and now they've done a lot of cleanup in these places. They have. The federal government has done a lot of work in terms of pouring resources into these veterans affairs offices and hospitals and stuff. So it's possible that it's a very different experience now than it was the last time you went. So I would ask them, well, when was the last time you went? How long ago? And for instance, so if it's a chronically homeless man who was in Vietnam, who went to the VA hospital when they got back and were totally disillusioned, right. That is a person that we would say, why don't we take another crack at it? Why don't we go back and see if it's changed at all? But if they were like, yeah, I was there last month and it was terrible, that's possible.
Okay. Yeah, just to answer that, as case manager, I've had clients who are veterans, and I've taken them to the doctor's appointments and stuff like that, and advocating for them and try to have them, get to the benefits coordinator, and I've seen it. The services is not perfect. So, that is a chief complaint. The medical attention they get is it's not up to par. I've seen it too. So, I've been there while they're getting that treatment. It's not
Keyword, you said medical though. So is it different between medical and housing shelter, or is it basically the same response from people?
From my experience is that organizations like Catholic Charities, they have their own budget for housing and stuff like that, separated for veterans. They were able to get people housed in a couple hours. But this is in Jersey.
Yeah.
Whereas I would have to take them to Office of Temporary Assistance or to Board of Social Services to try to get them into emergency motel or something like that.
So again, so a lot of times what the government will do is they'll even subcontract, they'll have organizations that do their own budgets, their own funding. So just case by case, if they're going to like one particular place, what ends up happening is for veterans specifically right now is they have a lot of programs that are set that do like sort of holistic care. They'll do multiple things. They'll help with health. They'll help with benefits. They'll help with like IDs, and they'll help with other things. So there's no like veterans housing only. There's not like a veterans housing intake place. There's programs that are set up to sort of get them connected to the places, but so it's not like they would have to go through sort of again every doesn't make sense for their office to only help people get housed. They will have that as a sort of a wing of their existing organization typically. So it's not, but again, this goes back to sort of our role. I think one of the things that we can do, especially as followers of Jesus, quite frankly, is help people through the process. Like to say, look, I understand that I'm not going to be the one that gets this person housed. I'm not going to be the person that actually like sits down with them and like gets them, like helps them fill out their application for housing, but I can take them to the place where they will do that and actually sort of help navigate that process so it's not as painful, or have a friend do it, or have some, like there's ways to sort of help move people through the process, or refer them to, so they're not all doing it by themselves. So many people who end up staying in the street for longer than they have to because they don't have someone to help them walk through it. There's no one there to kind of just not only point them where to go, but also just meet them there, or just have a couple people meet them there, or take them to lunch afterwards. There's amazing little things that can make all the difference in the world in terms of helping someone succeed. But so that's but again, in terms of veteran services, I can't even say, because we're not an organization that receives funding for housing. We're not. I just know from sort of conversations I've had that people are. There is a lot of money right now sort of in the pipeline for veterans housing. So that's a question to ask. He wasn't a veteran, and he was going to be in the shelter for a long time. He wasn't qualifying for affordable housing. So the next question was, what's preventing my friend in Harlem from reaching his goal, right? What's preventing him from getting to that affordable housing? And he said it's time. It's his appointments. What are those appointments? These are questions that I'm asking him. Why are you stuck? What's going on? Why are you going? He says, well, I'm stuck going from point A to point B. I'm stuck, getting to my appointments in my program. I have trouble for a requirement for staying in the shelter is often looking for a job. You actually have to have proof that you're actively looking for work to maintain your bed in the shelter system. There's usually some sort of condition. You can't just stay in the shelter system and not have any kind of inclination towards looking for work. So that is something that if you have to show proof that you're looking for work, which is hard if you're living in Queens and everyone you know is in the Bronx, and it's tough. So the other thing you mentioned was the program. Now, this is key. So for me, when I heard the word program, my ears perked up. So I'm like, okay, so what's going on? What kind of program are you in that you have to go into every day? Is it an outpatient program? What's going on? So if you hear someone who says, I'm in the program, odds are there's more to it, and you can ask questions. So what kind of program are you in? And for him, it was methadone. He told me he was in the methadone program. So I have like 12 minutes to explain the methadone program. It's great. So methadone is a prescription drug that is given to folks who are struggling with heroin addiction. That is a prescription, it's like I said, prescription drug. So the idea behind it is that instead of going to a dealer where you might risk shooting up and transferring HIV, overdose, and other kinds of sicknesses, you help the person by giving them a narcotic that simulates the effects of heroin and actually has the same basic properties, but instead it actually has a chemical that coats your receptors of the cells in your brain that gets high off heroin, so that if you are on methadone and then you shoot up heroin, you're not supposed to get high. It actually will block your brain's ability to receive the chemicals. So it basically minimizes your desire to use drugs, to use heroin. So it is a sort of an opiate substitute, but there are two different philosophies of methadone that are prevalent right now in the city of New York that I've run into. One is called methadone maintenance. Methadone maintenance is a program where someone basically has come to the conclusion that this person no longer will forever be addicted, will always need some form of replacement in their brain for the high that they've basically ruined their brain forever with their heroin, and now they need some sort of substitute that will forever be used to maintain that addiction craving. So the metaphor that one of the directors of the methadone programs told me was they associated methadone to glasses. She said, we all, I have bad eyes. I go to the eye doctor. When they give me glasses, I don't expect to not need those glasses ever, like in 2 years. I expect to wear those glasses the rest of my life. They would treat methadone the same way. They would say, well, your brain is forever damaged. Now you need methadone to treat your heroin addiction. So now you're going to have to be on methadone the rest of your life. So their goal is to find a balanced dose that allows you to minimize your cravings and allows you to actually sustain and be functional as an adult in this country.